The nuclear bomb! Total annihilation! And said annihilation would have come during the Cold War if the fear of its world-breaking capabilities hadn't also prevented its use.
So in this video, we'll take a look at those very weapons of mass destruction and how it made the world more dangerous, yet safer through the power of that glorious fear it caused. Then I'll describe to you all the closest point of which the world powers of the United States and the Soviet Union were to total war. The Cuban Missile Crisis. Then I'll tell you about how the nuclear technology was also adapted into rockets used in the space race, where the world powers raced to get a man on the moon, which was much less destructive than the nuclear arms race, which planned to destroy the world. The world greatly changed when the US exploded the hydrogen bomb in 1952, followed by the Russians' creation of the hydrogen bomb in 1953. This led to the world becoming a much more dangerous place. This also stimulated the arms race and creating a resilient competitive atmosphere between the world powers. The tension that was a-brewing eventually became known as the Cold War. It was cold because of the fact that the US and Russia never actually entered total war because it would be too devastating with the power of atomic weapons from the arms race to the entire planet. So, the products of the US-Soviet nuclear arms race made the world fearful of its dangerous potential, but that same fear is what protected the world and prevented its use, so that it would pave the way for the space race at the same time.
In July 16, 1945, the creation of the first atomic bomb came to fruition in the United States and was tested at Alamogordo, New Mexico at a site called Trinity. The atomic bomb had two objectives: a quick end of World War II, and possession by the US would allow control of foreign policy. This was just the first successful test of the atomic bomb, and gave the US a firm say in all foreign relations. The first nuclear bomb used in war was when the US bombed the two Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki on August 6th and 9th, 1945, respectively, during the final stage of World War II. The destruction caused by the bombing is what gave the W to the Allies on the Pacific Front and showed just how powerful the US is with no competition of countries with nuclear weapons. The big weapon invented through the arms race, however, was the Intercontinental Ballistic Missile, or ICBM, which were supported with the thermonuclear bomb, with a much greater destructive power than the original atomic bomb. Inertial guidance systems defines the difference between weight, the influence of gravity, and the impact of inertia, and powerful booster engines for multi-stage rockets. As a result, ballistic missiles became sufficiently accurate and powerful to destroy targets 8,000 kilometers, which is about 5,000 miles away. The utility of the missile allowed for a great say in foreign relations and was a product of the policy of massive retaliation, where any major Soviet attack would be met by a US missile headed straight for them. However, once the USSR got their hands on their own missiles, the arms race acted as a strong deterrent through promise of mutually assured destruction, and also creating a limited war due to the capacity of the nuclear weapons. That's right, mutually assured destruction, also known as MAD, was the idea that nuclear weapons should not be used on another country that has them, because then they're just going to exchange missiles with you as well. This is what caused for the strive for the missile gap, which is when one country is more nuclear advanced than the other, and MAD is less important. But there was one event during the Cold War that almost caused total war to go into full swing. A crisis that almost ignored MAD entirely. The Cuban Missile Crisis. The most serious Cold War confrontation between the United States and the USSR that took place in October 1962. The US discovered that the Soviets were in the process of positioning nuclear missiles in communist Cuba. The Soviet Union, out of retaliation for American missiles stationed in Turkey, had ordered missiles to be located in the Soviet allied country of Cuba, the current prime minister being Fidel Castro, a communist. 2 months later, on August 30th, a U-2 reconnaissance plane photographed photos from above Cuba depicting Soviet missiles being stationed there, and began the Great Missile Scare. even though it lasted only 13 days. But those 13 days were filled with global panic, and even to the point the government entering DEFCON 2, the highest recorded in history, which stands for the Armed Forces Ready for Deployment, and missiles prepped and ready for launch. Even the current president, John F. Kennedy, actually considered total war, but instead resulted to a naval blockade of Cuba. Then, Russia agrees to remove the missiles in Cuba in exchange for no invading of the country of Cuba from the US and the removal of the station missiles in Turkey. The US agrees and the crisis is resolved. The Cuban missiles are removed, and a few months later, the Turkish missiles are removed as well. With the climax of the Cold War over, it slowly starts to come to an end. The crisis was when the world powers were at the brink of nuclear war, and the probability of all-out war would have been much higher had the nuclear weapons not been the distraction. However, the threat of nuclear war was limited due to the awareness of its destruction and equal possession. The crisis was a clear example of the assured safety that MAD created through the fear of the big boom. So the arms race was a deadly competition of nuclear explosively doomsday-ish like rockets, and the same technology made way for a race with rockets that weren't so explosively doomsday-ish like. Space became a critical theater in the Cold War as each side competed to best each other's achievements in what became known as the space race. The race to space took place mainly from 1957 to 1975, with both world powers showing off their technology and striving to put a man on the surface of the moon. It really was a race when Sputnik was successfully launched into orbit on October 4, 1957, that caused a similar national U.S. concern of the Soviet superiority, just like the missile gap, but without the fear of nuclear war. When Sputnik was launched, that caused a similar national U.S. concern of Soviet superiority, just like the missile gap, but without the fear of nuclear war, which caused the United States to go into full swing for advancement of the NASA Apollo project. Most of modern-day rockets that the world uses were developed from the same technology the ICBM had, and it makes sense as the races happened during the same era, with the arms race and the space race. And those rocket technology have been improved upon for the advancement of space exploration today, instead of the intended world destruction, which hasn't really been innovated dramatically in a while. In summary, the Cold War was a war of ideas, technology, and missiles, which made up the arms race, had the ability to strike enough fear in the leaders of the world powers to prevent any actual missiles from being thrown at each other, and instead thrown to space, containing people, rather than warheads, towards the moon in the space race. So what? What importance does this have? Well, you are alive, right? Then give a shout out to the fear of nuclear weapons that didn't allow them to be launched in the first place and kill your ancestors, preventing you from being even born. Thanks, mutually assured destruction. In short, the thought of the big boom is why the big boom never came. Because we all know the big boom.